Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the MIT Sloan CIO Digital Learning Series. So we've been holding monthly webinars from June all the way through October, and we have music going now. Anyway, we've been holding monthly webinars from June through October, and by the way, I'm Allan Tate, the Executive Chair of the Digital Learning Series. And the overall theme of this series is leading a post-pandemic enterprise. And today is episode 5. This is the final episode for 2020, and we have a lot packed in. Panel number 1 will focus on digital transformation on the fast track. Panel number 2 will be building a digital-ready culture in traditional organizations. And finally, I'll close with a fireside chat on leadership in times of crisis. Be sure to use your Q&A app at the bottom of your screen to ask questions to the panelists. And so without further ado, let's get on with panel number 1. This is going to be moderated by Mike Grandinetti. He is a mentor, instructor, and program development fellow at the University of California at Berkeley at the Sutardja Center of Technology and Entrepreneurship. He is a C-level executive at 8 successful enterprise tech startups. He's affiliated with MIT in a variety of capacities over the past 20 years, including an MIT Sloan senior lecturer, an MIT judge for the 100K prize, an MIT Enterprise Forum instructor, and my favorite, he is also on the organizing team for the MIT Sloan CIO Symposium, and he is on the team that helps plan panels and speakers. Please join me in welcoming Mike Grandinetti.
Allan, thank you. And it's been a pleasure working with you to bring to the world the first time our own digital transformation as we pivoted hard from the MIT CIO Symposium after many, many years as a physical event. And I just want to applaud you and the rest of the team for bringing this series to our audience as we kind of wind up with our final event of the year. So thank you, and such a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you, Mike, and I look forward to your panel.
Thank you. All right, so folks, we have a wide range of very, very interesting panelists that we are going to be speaking to today. Now, digital transformation, of course, is a phrase that we've heard used for a long, long time. And it means many different things to many different people. And so we have the benefit of hearing from 4 senior level, deeply experienced panelists that come from very different industries, all of them leaders in their field, all of them who will share with us their experiences in not just the response to the pandemic, but we're going to use a Gartner Group framework, slightly modified, as a way of structuring our discussion. And so we're going to talk about the 4 R's today, right? I've been watching Sesame Street a lot over the break. And so this panel is brought to you by the letter R, okay? And so the first R will be the runway that led up until COVID-19 and all of the work that had been done by our panelists to enable them to bring digital transformation to their respective businesses and their clients' businesses. Then the next piece is, how have they responded to the pandemic in real time? The third piece is, what have they done to recover? And we're going to start off with that component with each of our 4 panelists. We'll then go to the final discussion where our panelists will be taking out their crystal balls, and they're going to talk about how they are, based on their learnings from their respective roles, how are they re-examining, reimagining, and ultimately reinventing and renewing the business going forward. So I'm very proud and pleased to have on our panel first Stephen Franchetti. Stephen is the Senior VP of IT and Business Technology at Slack. Slack, of course, has become synonymous, along with Zoom. It's become a verb. I will Slack you, right? And so it's become a verb in many ways around communication and collaboration virtually. Stephen has spent a lot of his career in Silicon Valley. Before that, he spent 3 or 4 years at Workday, spent over 11 years at Cisco Systems, and Slack has done a remarkable job of enabling all of us, or many of us, to continue to collaborate in a way that we could never have imagined having to. We've then got Zeshan Tariq, who is joining us today from his parents' home through the magic of Zoom from Pakistan. Zeshan has been the CTO of Zimmer Biomed, a medical equipment, medical device company, for 3.5 years. Before that, he spent 17 years in increasingly responsible positions at Medtronic, global leader in medical devices. Welcome, Zeshan. We've got Graham Wilkinson, who is Senior Vice President of Product and Innovation and Strategy with the Kinesso Group. The Kinesso Group is really the innovation arm of the Interpublic Group. Many of you may not know the Interpublic Group, but you know many of its underlying ad agencies as one of the world's largest ad agency holding companies. Graham runs a team of around 70, 75 people around product innovation, around platform management, around technology partner collaboration, data science, AI, machine modeling. Welcome, Graham. And then finally, we have Zachary Smith. Zachary is with Equinix. Equinix may be the longest running sponsor of the MIT CIO Symposium series. So thank you for your continuing support. Zachary was the co-founder of Packet. Packet was acquired a little less than a year ago by Equinix. And so he runs the bare metal business for Equinix. And so we're going to start off again with the runway, respond, and react model. And so, Stephen, no question that under the leadership of Stuart Butterfield and you and your team, beginning on that very ominous day, the 9th of March, when we saw work from home directives from Google and Facebook and Amazon, and the South by Southwest was canceled, you'd already seen signals coming from Italy. Your daily average users were increasing dramatically, and you had to take action, and you had to do it remotely. So as the gentleman that runs business technology and IT, right, supporting both internal infrastructure and your clients, take us back to that extraordinarily intense time in your professional career.
Yeah, and thanks, Mike. And it's great, by the way, to be here with you today with this esteemed panel that we have for the MIT Symposium. And great to see you again, Mike. And I have to say, I mean, it's been pretty surreal, the journey that we've been on this year. And I think if we go back to March, it all happened really quickly, which is what I think took most people off guard. When I think back, when all this was kicking off, 1 minute we were talking about deep cleaning our offices, and literally within 48 hours of our weekend, we're closing 18 offices globally across 10 countries and really trying to figure out how to support our 2,500 employees in working from home. But when I think about our response, kind of your first R, and really the transition that we went through, you're right. We actually saw a massive spike in usage to the tune of about 3 million users within 2 weeks, literally. And we went from about 10 million users to 13 million connected users on Slack within that time frame. So incredible growth, literally like we'd never seen before within a very short time frame. And of course, our first concern is making sure that our employees are safe and well and in a good place so they can effectively support our customers. But then you quickly turn your attention to, can the product infrastructure itself actually handle this massive additional load, and can the business actually continue to run? Now, interestingly, I will say that 50% of our user base is outside the US. So we already had this kind of distributed global architecture to scale to increase demand, almost like an elastic cloud architecture, as they say. But even though you run tests of scenarios like this with massive spikes in demand, you never really know what's going to happen in real life and how elastic your architecture will actually be. But thankfully, apart from a few nervous moments, that the product worked as designed, and we're able to actually scale up to meet that demand. So if I think about, the March timeframe, it was kind of like all hands on deck. Thankfully, the product worked well, but it was just one of those things that happened way faster than anyone could have imagined. And I will say, when I think about our customers, there's actually many amazing customer stories of using our technology to help them to adapt to this new working environment. And I know, Mike, we've talked about some of these before, but I think about HEB, which is one of the largest privately owned grocery retailers in the US. And literally over a weekend in March, we're rolling out Slack to over 100,000 employees at HEB to make sure that they could still effectively collaborate and connect to their entire supply chain across warehouses and suppliers and stores. And they were really using Slack to connect to their employees. We just kind of replaced that sense of engagement that people more naturally feel in the office. But it was also about how could they quickly adapt their team to the kind of new set of priorities, which became really crucial during the pandemic, and really make sure they could continue to operate their business. Yes. One last customer story I will
if
share.
I may, just for the benefit of our listeners, right, that, from what we've discussed and what I've learned, is to roll out Slack to 100,000 users normally would be a 15-month provisioning and licensing process. Right. That was done over 72 hours. So please continue with your story, but I would love to hear how you were able to move heaven and earth to allow that miraculous event to actually occur. Someone may be beatified by the Catholic Church as a result of that. It's remarkable.
Yeah. And it was amazing, actually. And it's actually amazing to see. And they say, kind of at times of, you look back in history, at times where there's major disruption in, life and in business in general, there's also periods of major innovation. And for us, it was literally almost reinventing our deployment model within a few hours, and actually pulling people in from other parts of the business, from sales, from my own organization, from IT, kind of all hands on deck to help them through that deployment process in 72 hours, as you said. So just incredible to see. And again, it's kind of the kind of resilience of the human spirit, not only on the customer side, but also on the Slack side to make that happen.
That's great. And you were going to share one other customer story. Please feel free.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of a heartwarming customer story that I personally love. And if you think about when all this was happening, the whole idea of mission critical started to take on a whole new meaning during the pandemic, where we had a number of customers actually using Slack literally in life and death situations. Yeah. So, for example, we had RPI Ambulance, which is a medical service in New York, actually in Manhattan. And if you think about what they do, a matter of seconds literally makes the difference between life and death and how they dispatch their ambulance service. And now they're actually using Slack to get to a much more instantaneous way of communicating and really allowing them to respond much faster, giving them that kind of critical time to get to the patient sooner, which is just incredible to see during this time of the pandemic. So some pretty amazing customer stories overall of how they were really responding and transitioning to this new way of working.
That's great, Steve. And from my own personal experience, I was on the board of a global ICU class ventilator design competition, working with Mass General Hospital and Harvard Medical School, and we used Slack. We had 213 teams in 43 countries around the world, and Slack was how we ran this global design sprint. So, and you were kind enough to donate it to us as a nonprofit entity. So thank you for that.
That's fantastic. Right. That's great to hear, Mike.
Zeshan, so this is a very interesting juxtaposition. So we have Stephen in the heart of Silicon Valley, and now we're going to go to a heavily regulated industry based in the Midwestern United States, where Zeshan and I spoke before the panel, right? Just the notion of virtual work was almost unheard of. It's an incredibly high-touch, humanistic world, and therefore probably, remarkably challenging to have to adapt so quickly, Zeshan. So can you kind of maybe take us through a little bit of that runway? I know that you've obviously been involved in the CIO Symposium as an award winner and as a thought leader and speaker, been acknowledged. So you've certainly been on the path toward digital. So I'd love to maybe hear a little bit about what you've been doing up until COVID, and then what you needed to do with your 1,000-person team to help, lead the business.
Absolutely. So it certainly is a pleasure to be with you all today. But before I get going, you introduced me as a CTO, and I don't want the company CTO to get worried.
Okay.
I'm still the CIO because I'll be getting texts and saying what happened. So I just want to put that.
I'm sorry about that, Zeshan.
That's quite all right, guys. Just wanted to make sure the CTO is not worried. He still is the CTO.
Okay.
Okay. So I can easily spend, without exaggeration, an hour on this question.
Yes.
In fact, I recently did when I provided an update to our board on this topic. It is said, as you know, luck favors the prepared. And in this case, particularly, I'm not sure if we were lucky or prepared, but you know what? I'll take either of them. So two things that worked really well for us. Zimmer Biomet is a global organization. So when COVID-19 crisis started in China in late 2019 or so, it truly was becoming a crisis. We were able to conduct a tabletop exercise to understand the potential implication on our ability to conduct business if it was to become a pandemic. And the insights we gained from that exercise particularly were invaluable in us getting prepared, or if you may, getting a lead start or head start. Secondly, in my experience, nothing helps more during chaos or crisis than to have a clear sense of direction. In that regard, I give a lot of credit to our CEO, Brian Henson, and I'll explain that in a second too. So Mike, to use your framing or your words, we organize our response to recovery effort in 4 key areas. And we certainly don't have time to cover all 4 of them in detail, so I'll briefly touch upon them in interest of time. First area, as already highlighted, was safety. But to us, it was not simply the physical safety of our team members, but also their financial safety. And a key enabler of financial safety for any of us is to be able to conduct work while being remote in this scenario, right? We have 25,000 team members globally, of which 6,000 are manufacturing team members, which meant for us that we have roughly about 19,000 plus team members who are scattered around the globe that not only needed to successfully connect, but also have the right capabilities at their disposal to stay productive and effective. The second area of focus for us was modeling and insight. In the middle of the chaos, as you can appreciate, timely and factual information is absolutely essential for good decision making. We needed to quickly understand the facts and perform scenario planning to get prepared. And so let me just quickly share an example in that category as well. So in our world, surgery schedule is the key leading indicator. We quickly modified our existing capabilities as solutions, if you may, to capture and better understand the impact of COVID-related cancellation on our revenue and inventory. And in parallel, to ensure working capital optimization, we created visibility to all SKUs globally at finished and at a component level. This aided our operations team to better understand what to or not to source, what to manufacture or stock. Third area for us was the financial flexibility. Think of it as our ability to pay bills or keep the lights on. Let me also share a quick example here. We established a global cash management office literally within days, which is able to monitor and report on cash position on a daily basis. Lastly, the fourth area, which if you may, you can say is the recovery part of it. We call it as revenue optimization, which is about modeling revenue and making sure we are able to satisfy it. And again, as you can all appreciate, none of this would have been possible without the right capabilities and without it being enabled through technology.
That's great.
So hopefully that gets your question.
That's great. And Zeshan, just one very interesting discussion point we had as we prepped that, your sales representatives are present in the operating theater, right, to provide technical support to surgeons. And of course, that wasn't happening during COVID-19. So we go from this extraordinarily high touch, deeply immersive experience. Can you comment on how you were able to manage that transition? because that's at the core of the value that you deliver.
Absolutely. And again, it's not just limited to that, Mike. You're absolutely right. Our organization is very high touch, and our sales team members are physically present in OR. But that goes beyond too, and I'll give you, to answer your question, a very specific example. We also sell capital equipment. And with COVID, the entire hospital systems were locked down, and rightly so. And people were, as they were trying to discover and learn a lot about this particular virus, if you may. And in that capacity, one of our obligation and our commitment to our customer is our ability to service this equipment, without which surgeries and other things cannot be adequately performed. So we leverage, because the speed was of essence, we leverage capabilities that are readily available, and not to necessarily call out one or over the other, but like Google Glass, something as simple as that, and gave it to those people who had access to the facilities, while the subject matter experts sat in the, if you may, the corporate headquarters and our control facilities, and walked them through all those things that we were doing first or before the crisis in person.
Okay. And had you used Google Glass before, or did you have to learn very quickly how to pivot toward getting value from that capability?
We piloted very quickly. It's very easy to, and again, it wasn't just Google Glass. It was iPad. Mixed and augmented reality. So that's, to Steve's point, that's where the creativity had to come in, and innovation for us to say, how could we solve a particular problem or an opportunity, depending on how you look at it, and then from there.
That's great. Zeshan, thank you. Graham, so you have spent a significant part of your career in the advertising industry. And of course, the advertising industry has gone through massive disruptive transformation. As Google and Facebook came on the scene and just consumed more and more ad spend. So, I had been teaching some advertising courses at an MBA level, and we transitioned at some point from the guys with ponytails and turtlenecks, and all of my guest speakers were data guys, right? Data people. So you've lived through this transformation, and yet COVID shows up, and, I notice all my podcasts, they pause for sponsor breaks, but there are no sponsors. So you get a 5-second jingle and then you're right back. I look at my Wall Street Journal now. It looks like the free newspaper I used to get when I was a kid. It's like 8 pages long, right? The number of ads in magazines has declined. So your client base, of course, was facing incredible challenges. And you are there now, needing to both support the internal infrastructure of massive change for I don't know how many companies within the holding company, but then all of your clients. So take us through what that's been like for you, from, a little bit of the runway up until you, having to face COVID, right? Because you'd been in the role maybe just a few months before this all came in with a big mandate. And of course, everything then changed.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mike, and thanks for the opportunity to be a part of this. A few things there. So first of all, Kinesso was kind of formed about just over a year ago, and so when I joined at the point the business was formed, and one of my mandates was to create a culture of innovation, and obviously in hindsight, and I'm pretty sure we've all used the word in hindsight in a lot in the last 6 months. Either in a good or a bad way. But, in hindsight, this idea of creating a culture of innovation is one of the things that I think has, been a great story coming, and we're not out the other side, but as we continue to try and push out the other side of this. So I kind of think about it from a couple of perspectives. So one is the people perspective, and you heard from Stephen the importance of people and the I suppose the way that software like Slack allows us to communicate and remain human to a certain extent while we're all being virtual. But one of the things that I believe makes businesses truly innovative is this idea of having people with a digital mindset. So people who are curious, people who are system thinkers, people who test and trial and build things and prototype. And so a lot of what was put in place in the back half of last year, which kind of set us up to deal, I think, better with COVID, were these ideas of people were already remote. Like my team, my innovation team is spread across 3 different continents and multiple cities within there. So it wasn't alien for us to kind of communicate that way. Where it kind of became a bit more difficult was situations like my product design team that were used to, say, getting into a room and whiteboarding things, and how could you really do that? And was the software available that would really kind of bring that human and creative interaction out? And, you know, credit to the people that are on my team, but again, that digital mindset kicks in and it goes, okay, let's just try things. Let's see what works. Let's try things really quickly. Let's share it. Let's not just try it and keep it in isolation, but let's share it with everybody else. So, you know, trying software like Miro, trying all the different video conferencing technologies, just to make sure that the tech wasn't just enabling the kind of basics, but it was actually allowing us to be innovative as well. The other side is obviously, you know, that was keeping the core innovation function in the business going. But the other side is, how do you sustain iterative innovation in a larger organization? So we already had plans in place for a program called Engine Plus, which was our equivalent of Shark Tank, and something that I've run similar in other agencies. And we decided to go ahead with it and you know, not reshape it, but make sure that it still could go ahead in an appropriate way for the new reality that we're all facing. And one of the reasons why, and credit to Arun Kumar, who's our CEO, and Ian Johnson, who's the COO, for backing us to do it. But we were all pretty sure this was going to be a fairly bleak time for the world. And we wanted to make sure that our people were given something that was beyond just the day-to-day of their jobs. And I think this program was really what has enabled, you know, in large part, it's given people optimism. It's given people the ability to communicate and collaborate on things that are not just the mundane of everybody's day-to-day lives. And has really been a huge positive out of coronavirus for us, and something that we've had tremendous engagement and great output from.
You know, Graham, that's interesting. So, because again, we all see how quickly innovation budgets, you know, future innovation budgets collapse in times of crisis. So again, I applaud the leadership. And it is interesting that it wasn't just for innovation's sake, it was also for keeping the morale up, and I guess signaling that there will be a future, the sun will shine again. And you know, as you've described the engine process to me, it's quite remarkably structured and disciplined. Is there any one project that you'd like to highlight that came out of that process that you have a lot of optimism about?
I mean, look, we have a lot of optimism for all 5 projects. So,
yeah.
So we had 27 entries, which was amazing to say that everybody had kind of gone remote. The world was in crisis, and yet people still wanted to enter this competition that we'd kind of put forward for everybody.
Yeah.
And then our group of mentors kind of whittled that down to 5 kind of that we felt really hit home with I suppose what we wanted to achieve from the program. And then those people were put through a 3-month program of mentorship from senior leadership in our business. So they were given product mentorship, commercial mentorship, marketing mentorship, and it was a real breadth of people as well. So people that were relatively junior from data science backgrounds, people that were from sales positions, and to then present it to our global CEO of our group, as well as the CFO and another one of our CEOs. You know, we did it in a live event. The live event was just a really great afternoon for everybody. And I was kind of blown away by how it seemed to just hit home with people and really make people happy, just in general, which is just a nice thing. And the added bonus is, as you said, the projects are great. And we're not revealing a lot about those projects right now, because those products are actually going into production. And that was part of the promise of the competition.
That's great. But it sounds like it really brought people together at a time when people really strive for connection. and it was both humanistic as well as productive. So that's great. All right. And then Zachary, if I may. So Zachary, again, runs the bare metal business for Equinix. And so in many ways, Zachary is a proxy to the market because he's helping so many organizations to, to respond. And so I know that, we had talked, Zoom is a client that they've helped scale. And that was another miraculous thing. They've worked with Cisco WebEx, but I've asked Zach to talk about maybe a couple of more mid-sized companies that they were able to help to show that this is not just the province of Silicon Valley giants, that organizations of all sizes and from all industries have the opportunity to succeed at digital transformation, even under great duress. So, Zach, would you be kind enough to take us through?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I wanted to give just a bit of background. I'm new to Equinix. I was a founder of a company called Packet, which was a venture-based business that was acquired by Equinix on March 2nd. So I got a front row seat to how to be integrated into a company during a global pandemic. But it's been an incredible experience. And I wanted to highlight three things before we talk a little bit about some of our customers' journeys. So Equinix, first and foremost, we see ourselves as the world's digital infrastructure provider. And how we do that is we operate the largest platform of global data centers. So we're in over 60 markets around the world, operating well over 200 physical data centers. And inside those data centers are over 10,000 enterprise and service provider customers and nearly 2,000 networks and clouds. And the reason why that's relevant is because we saw from the infrastructure up what was happening not only over the past few years as companies become more digital and go through that process of going through, we define digital transformation as going from a more siloed world into a more ecosystem-driven world. And we've seen that happen through the emancipation of the physical infrastructure substrate. But the three things that I noticed when I came here to Equinix that really helped us through this pandemic were, number one, our focus on our workforce. And I've heard that mentioned here a few other times, like Zeshan and whatnot. We're operating these physical data centers, and you can imagine what happened as soon as COVID hit, which is that people couldn't come to our data centers. They couldn't actually do the thing that they needed to do, which was scale their physical infrastructure. So they were relying upon our global workforce to do that. And one thing that we have here at Equinix is we say that we are in service, number one, to each other so that we can be in service to our customers. And we do that by making sure that every single employee can say, I'm safe, I belong, and I matter. So we had to make sure people were safe, number one, that they felt physically safe working in the data centers as critical employees, and that the rest of our company could gather around and support each other so that we could be in service to our customers like all of you. And so we focus, number one, on that. And I have to give a big shout out to our CEO, Charles, and Brandy, our head of people, who really focused on how to make sure people were safe in their various jobs. The second thing is that we needed to help our customers who were going through, and we like to call it just like a massive acceleration that happened within a few weeks. How do they go digital and rehome their network to be able to support work from home, to be able to scale their applications, to use video times 1,000, right, in their workforce? And so we did that by supporting remote hands, by guaranteeing supply chain access, which is a big part of our business. And we saw massive scaling in our interconnection fabrics, where clouds and companies and SaaS platforms and enterprises were just, the traffic graphs were pretty incredible to watch. And I think, Stephen here at Slack can say, if you're driving that much more traffic through your 3 million new users, you can imagine that every part of that infrastructure chain was being upgraded in real time to support that. So kudos out to our customers who were able to grow, so quickly. And we did notice that people who had invested in a interconnection-focused architecture, people who were there and able to turn on more capacity to their partners, like their clouds and their customers, they were able to move way quicker and respond. And the third thing was things that we did in our platform to enable our customers to access physical infrastructure in a software manner. So giving them access to what I do, which is physical compute across our global footprint, giving them access to more bandwidth and capacity through our interconnection fabrics and products. That was how we reacted to support our customers there. And two examples that I'll give, of course, we can go into what I'm going to call the digital leaders, the ones who are, auto-scaling their environments across continents and leveraging every new tool and platform. And we have to call out to some of those who are doing a great job, like Stephen
we don't have time to call out too many, okay? Because I would say if you can do Samsara as a starting point, that would be good.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's an excellent example.
Yeah.
So Sutardja Health is a customer of ours, the hospital system, 12 hospitals, 300 care centers, 3,500 doctors. And, instantly with COVID, like they have two constituents. Number one is their own workforce, which suddenly, saw a 500% increase in their home connectivity, meaning their network, VPNs, and everything else like that had to scale 500% within about a week. And then their customers, because they were providing telemedicine. And so what we saw is the investments that Sutardja had made in moving to a more cloud-based architecture and having their network homed in an ecosystem manner, they were able to dynamically turn on more capacity. Instead of something like a fixed network like MPLS, they were using SD-WAN built out that could connect to their cloud at Azure, where they're running their patient record systems and turn into a secure, regulated way to have video conferencing with their customers. And so I think it's pretty incredible that even relatively small and regional healthcare companies like Sutardja were able to take those investments of their digital transformation, which is effectively an interconnection and cloud, and scale that to meet their new paradigm. And it's been really humbling to watch what our customers have been able to accomplish.
That's great. Thank you, Zach. And so, guys, I'm gonna transition to the second part of our discussion. But Stephen Franchetti, a question that came through the chat, I'd like to ask you. And I know Slack, of course, very design centric. I know there's a lot of different metrics that you use to sort of measure the health of your business. But this question comes from someone who asks, what are the key metrics that you use, that Slack uses? Right? We've often thought about Slack replacing email. I know I have found in my own life a couple of times emails have been lost, and I had begged a client to work on Slack so that I knew that things were going to make it through. So can you talk a bit about how you measure success when it comes to your ability to kind of get traction within the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually a fascinating topic. And there's various different measures that we use. The first and foremost is just base adoption within our individual customers, and really understanding how kind of viral and sticky, if you like, the implementation has actually been. So I just got off a call with HSBC in the UK, and they've seen an 80% increase during the pandemic of Slack usage, and really they're using it in a way that we can almost create a network graph around how they collaborate. And you can look at it before, and then after, in actual fact, because now you've got all the data inside of Slack to see how departments are collaborating and how much more cross-functional that collaboration actually is, using this kind of network graph effect. We're also looking at things like, increasingly more so, we actually just rolled out about a year ago now a feature called Slack Connect, which actually allows our customers to connect to one another, not only internally use Slack for collaboration, but also externally to their entire value chain, to their partners and their customers. And what we're seeing there is, we talk about a network effect, a real kind of explosion of that network effect. So during the pandemic, we're now up to about 52,000 organizations are using Slack to collaborate with their partners and their customers. So again, we're looking at metrics like that to say, how effective is actually being, not only inside your organization at replacing email, because we can look at how email kind of trends down and how Slack trends up over time as kind of a base metric, but also, and I think equally as importantly, how does that look across your value chain, and how are we seeing it touch your partners and your customers and your suppliers, ultimately to get to a much more fluid and dynamic way of collaborating. So hopefully that helps.
That's great. Thank you, Stephen. And so, guys, now we're going to ask you to look into your crystal balls. And there's a great French philosopher whose quote I love, which is, "The future isn't what it used to be." And of course, as we sit here today, we've all learned a lot about, how business can in fact work with a lot more digital interaction, both with our employees as well as our customers. So you've all had a chance to observe, right? Kind of, re-examine, challenge a lot of norms that maybe we took for granted as urban myth. And now you are revisiting, and you are all charged with renewal of your businesses. So just the simple method will be, what are you going to stop doing? Because it turns out in retrospect, or in hindsight, as Graham said, maybe not all that valuable. What are you going to start doing for the first time? Because it turns out it's something you can do digitally. And what's something you'll continue to do because it turns out it was valuable both pre and post March 9th, pre and post COVID. So Stephen, I'll have you lead and we'll go through the same sequence again.
Yeah, no, it's a it's a fascinating topic that we've been thinking a lot about. And let me first say, I talk to a lot of CIOs and IT leaders in my role, and there's some themes emerging that I'll touch on really quickly that kind of answer your question. First of all, we're seeing that agility is the new scale, right? And the winners in the future are those companies that really stayed closest to their customers and really pivoted fastest to serve them best, and really embrace this whole idea of the digital HQ and what that means, or the digital office moving forward. The next thing I would say is culture is key ultimately, and hopefully that goes without saying, but businesses with really strong cultures aligned around clear values are faring much better, and again, emerging in much better shape ultimately at the end of the day. And then the last theme that we're seeing is really around the fact that more than ever, integration matters, right? So we're seeing this kind of wave of transformation, a new wave actually breaking right now, which is really around sort of correcting the fragmentation of work caused by the explosion of SaaS applications we've seen in the last decade or so. So the challenge that this has created is there's a lot of silos of data and knowledge and processes within the organization. And the digital HQ in the future is all about this kind of integrated work stack with more applications actually coming together and playing well together. Really quickly, because I know we're short of time, around stop, start, and continue. If I think about those themes as kind of the backdrop of what we're hearing from our customer, I think the office is going to be reinvented. And you talked about this, Mike. And so anything to do with kind of traditional office thinking around building out desks and things of that nature, we're stopping right now. And we're looking at how does this play forward? What does it mean in the future? What we're really looking at, we think about innovation, and what we're going to start and invest in is much more intelligent automation. We've done a bunch of that in the past at Slack, but more important now than ever is how do we make people's experience in their job as excellent as it possibly can be. And I think automation is going to be the key for that. So we do about 50% of our IT support through automation. We have a lots of bots and apps that we use inside of Slack that we use just to improve the employee experience and create productivity. And then the last thing is really, I mentioned before, around Slack Connect, and really continuing to kind of double down on that network effect that we're seeing to help companies, not only ourselves, but also our partners, our customers, and overall out there, the kind of value chain that we talked about, really improve the way they collaborate during this in the future.
That's great, Stephen. Thank you. And just a plug for the next panel. So my esteemed colleague, George Westerman, will be talking about the importance of culture, something Stephen touched on. So we'll look forward to that panel as we wrap up this one. Zeshan, how about you? You've got a 1,000-person team that you're managing globally. Your industry has gone through such a profound shift around supply chain management, etc. So look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, Mike, across the board. But again, just take a quick pause, and I'm not going to regurgitate what Stephen already mentioned. I'm going to try and build upon it in interest of time. I just find this fascinating because our subject at hand that we're discussing is the pace of digitization. And as I got done talking, my phone was buzzing again. I kept declining, and then I saw a text pop up. It was my wife, who never gets to see me in action, saying, "Zeshan, quit touching your face." So, it's it's fascinating times that we live in. And again, to your point, think about it. I'm here thousands of miles away and effectively able to conduct my work. So, but anyway, let me get to your question. One of the biggest realization, if you may, and I say the word realization because many did not believe that the organizations can remain productive and effective while being remote. Now, granted, not all jobs can be performed remotely today, but let's face it, it's those are few now, and the list is fast shrinking. Everything, by the way, that we did, that I briefly walked you guys through, and again, there's a lot more, of course, as you can imagine, that happens in each of those categories. Is not none of that is throwaway. We intend to build upon it, and so let me share one example, for instance, right? So before the crisis, and this is hopefully an example that will make the point across of all the process changes and way of conducting business, how it's changing. So up until the crisis, and this is a very benign example, but hopefully it'll make the point well. We as an organization track our sales on a monthly basis. And due to the urgency of the situation, we quickly needed to pivot and now have the ability to track on a daily basis, by country, by segmentation. And we rely on this information every day to make key decisions. I don't expect us to ever go back. In terms of what would we stop or what would change, we are a global organization with operations in 150 some countries. So definitely there was a significant travel spend. Now, I don't anticipate travel to disappear completely, but I do fully expect it to be reduced significantly. If in a similar vein, if you consider facilities, it was just brought up, we as an organization have over 380 sites globally. The question has to be, do we need all of them? Or at least we have to ask the question, do we need them in their current capacity? And again, to me, these are things that are here to stay. And I'll quickly end in interest of time, which is less related to technology or digitization, if you may, but still very, very relevant in terms of what we need to continue to do as an organization, right? And that's about people, call it talent or whatever you may. And at the end of the day, it's the people that makes all the difference. We have worked very, very hard to create a healthy culture, an environment where our team members could feel comfortable being themselves, where they believe they can be their best, where they feel that they are included, heard, so on and so forth. So as we continue to operate in this mostly virtual environment for the foreseeable future, our collective challenge is to ensure that this connective tissue is not only maintained, but further strengthened. I hope that gets to your question.
That's right. Absolutely. And I know that we are running very short on time. And I know that this being MIT, we like to be precise. I think, we go down to the 14th decimal point like pi. So, Allan, if you need to open the trapdoor and send us off, please let me know. Graham, maybe you can give me your quick thoughts on that as a futurist, if you will, as a guy that's always thinking about the future.
Yep, I'll try to be quick for you, Mike. Yeah. So in terms of stopping, I think one of the things that the current world situation has highlighted to the advertising industry is we have to stop adding complexity to our system. It is way too complex and way too fragmented, and solutions need to be consolidated, and clients need clear solutions. I think in terms of starting, I think we have to start asking why we are doing things more. I love the idea that people don't want a drill; they want a hole in a wall. And I think you need to ask why every time you want to add a layer of complexity to something. And then finally, I think we've all touched on this, but continuing to focus on people and culture is a really key element of a successful business. And I also think, I genuinely believe, focusing on innovation, even though that's not as simple as kind of saying that, I think building a culture that fosters innovation, again, is going to be what helps businesses win as the world is changing.
Yeah, that's great. And Zachary, if you may then give us
15 seconds or less. I think what we will, I'm not going to talk about what we'll stop doing. That's for another time. But for what we'll start is, I think, focusing in on our people, we have more work to do in terms of helping our people take advantage of highly distributed remote teams. So training on asynchronous communication norms, how we can support and interact and build relationships in a virtualized or distributed way. I think we have more work to do there, and we're going to continue to invest in that. And I think the area that we will definitely continue on is digitizing our platform. It's super clear that our customers want to access our value in more digital ways, and we're going to invest heavily to make that a reality for them in all aspects of our business.
That is great. And I'm going to answer one question from a former student of mine who is in Venezuela, as she typed her question. And so, Vanessa, hello. The subject you raised, of course, about remote work is a fascinating one. And you have, on the one side, you've got people like Stuart Butterfield, who is Stephen's boss, who is the head of Slack, who just made some comments at Fast Company this week that you're going to see a lot less people coming to the office on a regular basis. And I think a lot of people, including the head of Siemens, right? And we don't think of Siemens necessarily as an avant-garde company, a large German industrial conglomerate, but they made some very powerful statements about the future of work is about outcomes, not about time in the office. But then you've got people like Reed Hastings who come out and say he hates remote work. And the minute there's a vaccine, he wants to bring people back to the office. But at the end of the day, just yesterday, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, the number of houses available on the market in San Francisco is at an all-time high. Real estate prices are down 15%. You're seeing an exodus from a lot of these culturally elite cities. So I do think that it has changed everything. And I will say this, when venture capitalists are willing to give out money on pitches that are done over Zoom, the world has changed. So for you being in Venezuela, of course, going through incredible challenges, and my heart goes out to you and all of my former students there, I think there's hope that you get to work at what we would call the top of your license, okay? So with that, I want to thank Stephen Franchetti from Slack, Graham Wilkinson from Kinesso Interpublic Group, Zachary Smith from Equinix, and Zeshan Tariq, the CIO of Zimmer Biomet, for very, very thoughtful commentary and just taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us today. Allan, I hand the floor back to you.
Okay, well, that was a great panel. There's a wonderful range of stories that I really enjoyed. Thanks to Mike and Zeshan, Stephen, Zachary, and Graham. And special call out to Mike for all the work in helping pull this together as the moderator. So now to the second part of our webinar, we're going to go to panel number 2, which is building a digital-ready culture in traditional organizations. And this is going to be moderated by an old friend, Dr. George Westerman, who has moderated so many panels for the Symposium over the years. He is a senior lecturer at the MIT Sloan School of Management, a faculty advisor to and former member of the board of directors for the Technology Business Management Council. He's written 3 award-winning books, including Leading Digital, Turning Technology into Business Transformation, and also, like Mike, he is a member of the MIT Sloan CIO Symposium organizing team. He co-chairs the CIO Leadership Award. Please join me in welcoming George Westerman. Hi, George.
Hey, Allan, it's great to be here. And as always, it's great to work with you.
Thanks a lot.
This is the last in the series, right? Usually we run this event in May and it's just one day. And now we're doing 10 months of monthly things. So,
well, we had to pivot.
Great, good. So I'm delighted to be here and to talk about a really important topic here, which is building digital culture. The last panel talked about, the idea of the people having to manage the people side of this whole COVID thing, right? Help first getting people to feel safe, then figuring out how to work remotely. And then it started touching on this, building this innovative culture. And that's exactly where we want to go here, is how to build that kind of innovative culture. We have 2 great panelists, Shamim Mohammad from Carmax and Cynthia Sutardja from Adobe. And we'll be able to go into some real depth on how they've built this culture in their organizations. I want to start, though, first by sharing some research that we've done here at Sloan on what this means. And then that'll set up the conversation as we go farther on it. So let me share the screen here. Sorry, let's do that one more time. Okay, we should be ready now. So technology is moving quickly. Certainly with COVID, the business environment is moving quickly. We all know Moore's Law. And Moore's Law, you know what it means, right? Technology is doubling in its power every 18 to 24 months. I want to give you George's Law. And George's Law is pretty simple. It's this. Technology changes quickly, but organizations change much more slowly. And I think we knew that. We didn't need a law to say that. We'll lose that often when we talk about technology, though, and especially among the CIO audience and the vendor audience. You know, we can focus so much on the technology, we forget about the fact that it's the organization that drives the value. And if one thing COVID has done for us, it's really called attention to the people. And how do we get the people to work together? How do we get the people to really drive, how the people drive this company forward, and how we help them do that even more strongly? The really critical part of this is this. If you think about digital transformation as two words, we often pay too much attention to the digital and not enough to the transformation. And transformation is the real challenge. In fact, if we want to say it differently, we could say it this way. It's not a technology challenge. It's really a leadership one. And that's why I'm so delighted to have these two great leaders here on the panel to share what they are doing. If we want to jump in, you know, the leadership challenge of driving the change, the leadership challenge of being ready for COVID, the leadership challenge of just using technology to drive advantage in your companies in general. This culture is the stuff that it's hardest to do. It tends to come along a little bit more slowly, but if you get it right, then you're golden for the rest of the work, because then it starts to help drive itself. So if we want to extend George's Law here, let's think about it this way. Technology changes, organizations change much more slowly. Unfortunately, organizations change even more slowly than that. Now, as an academic, you know, we always start with definitions. I want to give you my very favorite definition. Certainly, you hear things like culture eats strategy for lunch, which is Peter Drucker, and you hear all kinds of very academic definitions from my academic peers. Here's the best definition I've ever heard. It's this. Culture is what happens when the boss leaves the room. And you all know exactly what I mean. And the tricky part is the culture is what happens when the boss leaves the room. The room is the room, and the rooms and the company are much bigger than what the boss can be in. And so this is something that we need to help people develop among themselves in their work groups. Culture is what happens when the boss leaves the room, but it is the job of the boss to create that. So when we were studying digital transformation, we've been studying this for 10 years now. And a few years back, we started really getting into the idea of digital culture. Companies kept saying things like, I would love to have the culture of that great digital firm. Put the name here, right? And the more we dug into it, the more we realized that while those cultures can be pretty well specified, it's very hard to put the conditions for all those conditions into a traditional firm. You can't hire and fire and pay the same way. There are ways that you would need to operate with physical products that are harder to do than when you have digital products. And so we started studying what can traditional organizations do to get a digital ready culture. And this led to an article in Sloan Management Review last year. What I want to do is just share what a few steps here, because they'll frame the conversation going forward. So here's my definition: shared and mutually reinforcing set of values and practices for performance in innovation and execution. Fine, you got your definition. I'm a professor, I have to do that. But here's how we think about getting at that. If this is really about values and practices, what do we see? The first thing we found is in digital companies, they have a different set of values than traditional companies tend to have. And our survey research comparing digital and traditional companies bears this out. So as you're trying to build a culture that's digital ready, you want to build these four values. Number one is impact. Really focusing more on impact than on profitability, and because the impact will inspire your people. It'll be that why of why they come to work. Number two is speed. We know that. Number three is autonomy, giving people discretion within guide rails to just do what's being done rather than asking for permission every time. There is a terrible quote out there that says it's better to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. And that tends to be an excuse for a whole lot of bad behavior. That's not what we mean here. What we mean here is give people clarity on where they can work, and then they'll work within there, and then they'll reach out and talk to people when they need to get outside those guide rails. And then last but not least is openness. engaging with whoever needs to be engaged with, inside or outside of your unit, inside or outside of your company. So if you do not have these values, it's time to start talking about these values. And these values do not need to replace the values you have. They can live on top, but they're what help to drive you forward. So that's the values. If culture is about values and practices, then we'll get into the practices. And I'm doing this very quickly. We could talk for hours and days about this topic. I'm just trying to give you the research so you have these pieces, and you can see the article at the bottom, and then we could talk about them. We looked at a spectrum of practices for digital and looked at them in digital companies and traditional companies. And we found out that the practices to the left are predominant in digital companies and less in traditional companies. Rapid experimentation, self-organizing, driving decisions with data. We know we should do that. The digital companies are good. Traditional companies are not as good. Over to the right is more aligned with traditional companies, assessing over customers, focusing on results, integrity, stability, rules. The farther to the right you get, the more that inhibits innovation. And what we see in that overlap is interesting. The customer and the results, we see about the same level in digital and traditional companies. They are just different. So one last point then, if we want to build those practices in these companies, one way to think about it is what order to go through in doing these. First thing, what's really clear from the data is build these practices. Rapid experimentation, self-organizing, data orientation. It's really essential to do these because that's what's going to allow you to be innovative and move forward quickly. We know how to do this. If you are doing Agile, it's a good start on this. It's not all the way, but it's a good start. And then try to get Agile to go throughout the company. But it's hard, but it can be done. And our panelists will help share that. Number two, this idea of integrity and stability, the processes you've got to get there, our data shows you can keep these without being less innovative. And so keep them. Don't let your innovations hurt your company. Next up, reorient. The way most companies think about being customer responsive, being driven by results is not the way the digital ones do. How do we think about that? Customer responsiveness is not asking the customers what they want. It's leading the customers with innovation and see what they like. That also leads to a results thing. If you're managing by the quarterly numbers, you're a quarter behind on everything that was doing. And Zeshan was interesting. He said they went from looking at sales monthly to looking at sales daily. And this kind of thing, it should be a regular practice now, looking at the results on a regular basis rather than behind the time. Last but not least, this idea of rules orientation, we all know the people who use the rules to stop progress. That needs to stop. And so while we're building and preserving and reorienting, if you have people doing that rules orientation, it's time to help them change their behavior very, very quickly, because that's not what we want to be doing in these cultures. So if we get back again to this idea that culture is what happens when the boss leaves the room, it is the boss's job to make this culture so the culture continues when they're not there. This was a very fast run through some research to help you think through that you could see an article on it at the bottom there. But what we want to really get to is the main part of the show now, which is our two panelists. So I'm really delighted to be able to talk today with two people, Cynthia Stoddard from Adobe and Shamim Mohammad from Carmax. You're both here on stage. Why don't we start off with introductions, and you can introduce yourself. Cindy, why don't you start us?
Great. Thanks, George. I'm really happy to be here and talk to everybody this morning. So I'm Cindy Stoddard. I'm the CIO at Adobe. I've been at Adobe for slightly over 4 years, and I have responsibility for both the IT systems, data, infrastructure, and what we call reliability engineering, which is the run component of our product. Adobe, we've been through a digital journey. If you go back in time, we actually sold box software, pick, pack, and ship. But now, I would say that we're, very sophisticated in our world, selling in a SaaS model. We moved from desktop applications to suites to the cloud, and now we have platforms and intelligence that we provide to our customers. So, since I've been there, I would say that the focus has been on reliability and uptime to give our customers a great experience. And then also using data to really look at our customer journey and make that experience better for them. Hey, George.
Great. And Shamim, why don't you introduce?
Good morning, George, and good morning, Cindy. It's good to see both of you, and glad to be here today. So Carmax was founded a little over 25 years ago. And think about a traditional company. We were a traditional company. We are a brick and mortar company that was established to drive transparency and integrity in an industry like used car business that didn't have integrity and honesty and transparency. So I joined the company a little over 8 years ago. I am the Chief Information and Technology Officer, so I play a dual role. And over the past few years, Carmax has really been going through a lot of transformation. And the goal of the transformation was to take this traditional company who was a market leader, who was built on integrity and transparency, and take that company and make it a digital company, and make the company innovate faster. The reason that was important was our customers were changing fast, right? So the customers were expecting to do a lot more on their own terms. They wanted to buy and sell a car online or for a mobile device. So we had to make sure that we're able to meet where the customers wanted us to meet, and give them the tools and capabilities so that they are in the drive. So part of our digital transformation, George, there are three major components. One was taking the existing wonderful qualities the company had, the great elements of the culture, and then infuse it with a lot of the digital company attributes. The second thing we did is we moved from a project-centric organization that is more sequential, it's like a roadmap-driven, annual planning cycle, to a more of a product-centric organization. And these product teams really work very differently. Like they work like small startup companies. They do a lot of rapid test and learn. They are empowered. They are cross-functional. So most of our work gets done through that way. The third thing we did as part of a transformation was build some of the core digital capabilities, some of the technology we transformed, so they allow us to scale and innovate very rapidly. I'm glad we did all this before the pandemic, because it really, during the pandemic, really helped us and accelerate a lot of the innovation that we needed to do.
Wonderful, thank you. You all have such amazing stories to share, and I want to just start off. The earlier panel spent so much time thinking about this idea of what's happening to COVID and how you work it. So if we can think through that side, let's say a little bit more on this COVID idea. What did COVID do to your culture? And, what did you have? Shamim, you already started with what some of the things you had in place. What do you have in place that worked? What did you need to change in this culture world?
So George, one of the things, we take obviously a lot of pride in terms of having a great culture, and our culture was very much in person and face-to-face kind of environment. And so that's something changed because of the pandemic. Now, if you think about our workforce, there's really two sides of the two types of teams, right? We have the teams that are in the field, they're in the stores, they're in the operation, they're working with the customers face-to-face. So that part actually hasn't changed. We're just doing that a little differently in terms of doing it a safe way for the customers and for the associates. But if you think about the corporate users, the technology team, the product team, marketing, all of them are working remotely, and that is a big change. Now, because the way we were working even before the pandemic, where our teams were empowered, and the culture where we have they're mission driven and goals oriented, that those attributes really translated very well, and I was really happy to see that, because because I was not sure how this is going to translate into everybody being remote 100% of the time. But because we have this empowered mindset where we give teams goals and we tell them what to do and they figure out how to get it done, actually, I'm finding that they're a lot more effective sometimes in the 100% remote environment. Now, there's still a lot of things we're learning, like how do we have that human element? How do we make sure we do a good job onboarding new teams to the mix? How do we make sure that we don't lose the great elements of our culture because everybody's 100% remote now? So we're still learning a few things, but we're just a few things. For example, we do a lot more regular touch-ups. We have virtual happy hours. I reach out to a lot of the folks one-on-one multiple times, right? So we're just experimenting, and as a company, we have this experimentation mindset. We test and learn. So we look at this as a big experimentation, but we are laser focused on making sure the great culture that makes Carmax we preserve it and we make it better even in this remote environment.
Cindy, I'm seeing you want to jump in here.
Yeah, I do. Our culture has been always very people focused. I love being at Adobe. The employee comes first, and as we've gone through COVID, we've reinforced that message with the employees. Saying that your family, your health is number one. Our customers are number two, and then on with the rest of the work that needs to take place. When I look at the last 8 to 9 months or however long it's been, seems like it's been forever that we've been working from home. I think that COVID has made our culture stronger. Things that were kind of behind a wall before, like my house, as everybody sees here, and people's children and whatever, is opened up. There's a little bit more of the family environment that has been brought into the workplace because we are working from home and juggling many different things. So I think with that, the culture has become stronger. We've become more sensitive, I think, to family environments, maybe to children going through schooling and, elder care or whatever. And also, I think we've become more aware that we need to build walls and we need to allow people to have time, in the morning so that they can get their children off to school virtually, and, in the evenings during family time, because we're really in this blended world right now. When I look at how we work, I think the organization has been very creative using the tools that we gave them. We basically clicked over 25,000 people without a blink, and productivity has remained very strong. But I think that people have realized that they can work differently. Because what I see in my own organization is efforts that would have taken perhaps 6 to 9 months to get done, with an evaluation and multiple POCs and reviews. We've done them in weeks, and we've done them quite successfully and brought them live. So I think this has sparked a new level of innovation and a new way of working with the different teams, within Adobe.
George, if I can just add to that, simply that's really, really great comment. I think the intensity and the focus that I've seen in the last 6 months, that I've never seen that before, right? I was very, very pleasantly surprised with how creative teams are able to be, and even being in this crisis environment, they're being tremendously focused, and they brought a whole level of intensity and energy to get things back to our customers and our associates, which has been really impressive.
Well, so that's really interesting. You talked about this level of intensity. Is this something that can continue? Cindy, you kind of suggested that maybe they're working differently, not just more intensely, but actually differently.
Well, I would say that, yes, both. I would say both is true. There is a level of intensity, but people are working differently because, they need to get things done and have realized that maybe we don't need to go through some of the long cycles. So, we have examples internally of what we've done. Can it sustain? I think that people do need breaks, from the intense work schedules that we have. I would say that, working with my team, what we have, said is, things like on Friday afternoons, no meetings. That gives people time to, catch up on, thinking, reading, and whatever else they have, activities they have to do. Because the only real protected time that has a boundary now in some form is the weekend. Because the days kind of roll together, especially if you're a global organization. So we try to be very respectful of the weekends and make sure that people have time down so that they can, come back to work on Monday refreshed and ready to go. And we've also started, we've done it twice, a global day off. Every third Friday is a global day off for Adobe. So we're able to allow the entire organization, except of course, customer support and, running some of our great customer applications. But for the most part, I would say people are off, and it gives them time to recharge, and people aren't doing email. And we do look at the productivity stats, and we can see that people are taking advantage of it. So I think that, yes, people can be intense, they can work differently, but people just need a break as well.
And this idea of taking the break, you had mentioned it, your kids are not with you and your kids are trying to go to school from home while you're working. Not you in general, but just the people in general, right?
Yes.
And we have lots of distractions. We're taking Friday afternoons off, but productivity is not changing. That's a really interesting thought for what we were doing to productivity when people were in the office. What's the biggest change you saw that less hours and more productivity?
I think it's not necessarily less hours, but as Cindy mentioned, it's really around the flexibility. And the teams have option, and they can decide when to work. And productivity is interesting, right? We measure productivity based on the business outcome goals. If productivity is not something, how many lines of code somebody delivered, or what system they turned on. So because we are an OKR, objective and key results driven organization, teams are very clear in terms of what business objectives they have to get done, and they figure out how to get it done the best way. I think that's really the key difference. And now, the team don't have to drive to the office, they don't have some of the other distractions. So it's really allowing them to focus on delivering the business outcome goal. The other thing that happened also, I think, as Cindy kind of mentioned, they have reprioritized some of the work. Some of the things that are important before pandemic may not be as important, and some new things that came out that became a different priority. One example for Carmax, we were in the middle of driving an omni-channel experience to the whole country, right? This is really bringing the online and in-store experience, taking the traditional and digital, merging together. And we're on track to deliver the whole experience to the entire company by end of this year. What happened is, because of the pandemic, we delivered that to the rest of the country 6 months ahead of schedule. We completed that end of August. So just to give you a sense of how fast we're able to move and how fast we're able to adjust, even in this kind of environment.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've had similar situations also within Adobe with our onboarding our interns and figuring out a way to get them into the 700 plus interns into Adobe for the summer. People are very creative. They want the organization to be successful, so they jump in with new ideas. And absolutely correct, things can get done quicker, and it builds a new camaraderie because everybody's virtual, right? So, and everybody's equal in a way. We've had remote employees in the past, and prior to COVID, and when you were in a physical conference room, the people within the physical conference room would talk and do things, and people felt maybe a little bit left off when they were on video or on the phone. But now we're all equal, right? Everybody's on video, everybody has a connection, everybody can have a problem and turn fuzzy or whatever. And, I've seen that many people that never spoke up before in meetings are speaking up and offering fantastic ideas in order to drive solutions forward.
Thank you. So we talked about this idea of values and trying to figure out whether these go on top of your values or whether they replace your values. These ideas of the speed and the impact, the openness, these kinds of things. How have you built those values in your organization?
So I can start. Oh, go on. You go first.
So as I shared earlier, before even the pandemic, part of our digital transformation, we actually moved away from being a project-based organization to a product-centric organization. And there's certain characteristics of that. So the product teams have OKRs. They're reviewed every 2 weeks, and they're adjusted. We tell them what to do. They figure out how to get it done through a lot of experimentation and testing. And every 2 weeks, they have open houses where they get to share what they learned, what mistakes they made, and what they're focusing on for the next couple of weeks. And those open houses are attended by senior executives of the team, CEO, myself, basically all the key leaders. And what happened is we took all of those practices into virtual now. We're continuing all those things. And to Cindy's point earlier, actually, we have a lot more people now able to participate from across the company than before. And it's been really great. And we have a lot more presentation we can have. So the transparency that into the work the teams are doing is extremely valuable. It also is very empowering for the team. The fact that we don't tell them how to get anything done, or most of the things done, they're very creative, and they often surprise us with the level of creativity, because they can come up with ideas that we would, as leadership team, would never can think about that. So that's really how we are able to maintain the focus on innovation, and how we're able to speed the pace of innovation for us.
Yeah, I can definitely add to that. Within the organization, we started actually a few years back with creating an identity. What do we want to be? And our rally cry has been, we want to have cloud-like characteristics in our DNA, and not necessarily the cloud as a place to run, although that is part of it, but really thinking about the cloud and what it stands for. Self-service, easy to use, different, walls broken down. So what we've done is we've challenged the team to think about that, and think about how they can look at their applications, how they work, how they operate with their business users. And we actually created what we call an IT Identity Award, which recognizes the behaviors. And this is peer nominated, or could be our business user nomination as well. And I would say that this has really driven a tremendous culture change within the organization. People will take small projects, they will experiment, they will put them on display, they will show off, what they have, and many of their ideas have turned into some great things that we use in our production environment. We created out of this what we call a self-healing framework that looks at issues when, the jobs are running, or, different services are running, to look for patterns of different errors that can be self-corrected and self-healed. So when you give people the time to innovate and think and experiment, and let them fail a little bit and come back with those ideas and be able to present and have their ideas recognized, it becomes a tremendous culture change within an organization.
So, I want to get into this idea of the changing the culture. This is really hard stuff. And you guys talk about having done it, but of course there was a lot of work to be. So Diane Daniel had asked, what barriers do you have to remove to make this happen? Or I could ask it a different way. What's been the hardest part of changing culture to make this happen?
That's a great question, George. Just like there's definitely an immune system in the organization, and the immune system in the organization is to resist change, just like human body, right? So the biggest challenge was to make sure that our associates, we have 25,000 associates, they believe that we're serious about the change. So that was the biggest thing, getting our senior leadership team aligned, our executive team aligned, and walking the talk and standing behind this change. That was the first thing we had to do. And then this is something, the culture is very much very intentional. It's not an accident, right? And to add to your definition, culture is the operating system. It's not what people do. It's definitely what people do when they watch it in the room. It is the operating system that runs the company. So for us, we were serious about this, and it showed up in every part of the organization, and it was not a flavor of the day. And this is the changes we've been going through the last 4 or 5 years. Still, we're going through the changes. We are not deviating from it. So have to be very serious, have to be all in. You cannot be tippy-toeing in this change. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And what I would add to that is one word called trust. People need to develop a sense of trust, and you do that by living the walk, right? Walking the talk and living it and setting the example. And when you say, hey, innovate, and it's okay to fail and try out, it's okay to fail. And when people develop and bring ideas forward, showcase them and use them. I mean, the worst thing to happen is to say we're going to do all these wonderful things, and then people have great ideas and they go on the shelf and they're never used. That would be totally demoralizing. So you have to work and build a sense of trust with the organization. Live and breathe and share and talk and have an open door, and the culture comes around.
And
Well,
George,
let's get at that trust thing. I think that trust is a really interesting question. Why, you're CIOs, you're the tech guys in this organization. Why should they listen to you about culture?
For
because
people
not,
too. Go on.
That's,
Go on.
yeah, it's not because a CIO alone going and making the change for the company, that would be a very big failure. This cultural change has to be a joint effort by the CIO and his or her colleagues, and all the way from the board of directors, right? So has to be an all-in. One thing I was going to mention to you is, this change you have to measure along the way. Make sure that it's resonating with your team and your team are buying into this and they're trusting, to Cynthia's point, they're trusting the change that you're taking them through. So for Carmax, for example, one of the things we measure is our associate engagement. Despite all the changes and tremendous change we went through, the engagement at our company is the highest right now that has ever been. So one of the things we measure also, the Fortune 100 Best Place to Work, right? Great Place Institute, they do this. And our associates decide whether or not we're going to be on the list. We've been consistently going up to this. This year, early this year, we were number 20, which is the best ranking we ever had. So that gives us a lot of comfort knowing that everything we're taking the company through, all the changes we're going through, it is really our associates are liking this change. Although it's hard work, but they're on board and they're supporting the change. So that's the thing. You have to make sure it's not just the CIO trying to change the company's culture. It's everybody's job, but more importantly, is the senior leadership team, they have to be all in for this change.
I totally agree. And I also believe that CIOs, that we are in a pretty unique position because we have a horizontal view across the organization. And, we can see what's working and what's not working and, the pockets that need to be worked on. And what I have found in those situations is, to Shamim's point, you go work with the leaders, right? One-on-one, you bring them on board. And it takes a lot of relationship building, a lot of, discussion, but, we can do it. And like I say, we're in a unique position because we can see the processes, we can see how people behave, we can see what the roadblocks are, and we can help break down those roadblocks between different organizations within a company.
That's so interesting, Cindy. I was doing some work with the top 50 people in a huge insurance company, and I teach this course called Essential IT for the non-IT executives. So we're doing a similar version of that in this company, just helping to let the business folks understand more about how IT works. One of the things that we did is we brought in the head of the IT soft factory, the Agile factory, and he talked about what they've been able to do to change IT around and to create this culture in IT and make things move faster. And the first thing that happened is 3 people from the room said, I want that. How do we do that in my part of the organization? So it was the idea that because they knew so many people and because they were doing it in this hard place first, now it's been proven. Now we can start to prove if the CIO can actually be the missionary, the evangelist to bring this throughout the organization too.
Exactly. Right on. That's our role. I mean, I tell my staff, I don't really do anything. I'm here to remove roadblocks, get you the resources that you need to be successful. So, dump all your problems and escalations on me because I want the organization to be successful. And I'll do that by, meeting with whoever and, getting you the resources that you need to get your projects and efforts done. And that's across the board.
Very
You're
cool.
smiling, so.
That's awesome. I'm hearing you say, bring me all your projects and your escalations and all your problems. I'm saying, man, no, don't bring them to me.
That's what we deal with, right?
One of the things that came up in the discussion, and it comes up often, is this idea that, does paying attention to integrity hurt innovation? And of course, we know it doesn't, but how do you manage it? Integrity, stability, how do you manage it so it doesn't hurt innovation, so that these checkpoints and things don't get in the way? And Cindy, I know you had an interesting viewpoint on that.
Yeah. So, I think that there is a viewpoint in the world that, go fast, take out all the process and you're going to get things to market a lot faster. I guess I'm not in that camp. I believe that there needs to be a certain amount of process and checkpoints, because I think that structure actually allows you to go faster with a higher level of quality. So, and I'm not talking about heavy process, I'm talking about checkpoints and things that allow people to know what their guardrails are so that they're operating within the guardrails. And what I have found, working with my team and with engineering teams, is that if they know what those guardrails are, they're going to operate, within them, and they're going to deliver. And I think it's similar to what Shamim was talking about before with his teams, saying that now that they're really self-directing and they know how to operate and bring things forward. So I'm totally in the, hey, let's give people some guardrails, let's help them move, and let's have those checkpoints, because it's one thing to get to market quicker, but if it's a disaster, then you haven't really done anything. And we all know that it costs more to go back and fix than it is to do it the right way, from the get-go.
This leads me to think about, what Shamim, you had said is, part of what they're doing is not, they're stopping things that maybe were not leading to productivity. And this is a great chance to stop them. Is there something in these review processes, something in these checkpoints? Cindy, you had said, they don't have to be heavy. They can be a little bit lighter. What do you give up from your processes to make them be just as good, but more agile in these integrity questions, these stability questions?
So George, first of all, the integrity is non-negotiable, right? If you think about our business, we're in this used car retail business, right? And it's not known for integrity. So our whole business model is built on having that integrity. So that's just non-negotiable, and this is something deeply ingrained in everything we do in the company. Now, on the prioritization and having process, some level of process is needed. But it's really very light process, right? For us, it's really, we set the quarterly OKR, objectives and key results. We align across all the product teams so they know what they need to do at a very high level to achieve what goals they have to go after. And then they do a lot of experiments, and then they report back every 2 weeks. So there's only so far they can deviate in those 2 weeks. There's so many mistakes they can make, right? So many experiments they can do, and so much that they can learn. So they can adjust every couple of weeks. They adjust based on what they learn in the prior 2 weeks. So that gives them a lot of flexibility. At the same time, it doesn't become a wild west where you don't have any control, and we make any big major mistakes. Also, George, one thing we do, we really focus on minimum viable product. And you talked about the customer experience and customer obsession. Our goal is to get the new capability or new experience in front of the customer as soon as possible, even though it may not be fully baked. So then the customers can tell us whether they like it or not. And when I say customers, it's just our external customers and our internal customers, because you cannot forget about them, right? So it's really that experimentation mindset, getting real feedback from the real users and customers, help us guide. Are we on the right track, or are we not on the right track? And what adjustment we need to make.
Wonderful. I just saw that we are at the end of our time already. I can't believe how fast we went. And I just want to go on for about 3 more hours. So maybe we'll just have to continue in the green room later. I want to thank you both for just being here and just, being so free with your sharing and so thoughtful in the kinds of answers you gave. I gave you one assignment just to spin us out of this panel. So if we can just start, I'll just ask you the one question and you've got 1 sentence to answer it, and that'll take us from there. So why don't we start, Cindy, you're on the left of the screen. So let's start with you. What should CIOs do first to build the digital ready culture their companies need?
So I would say that build that trust with your team and let them innovate. Because, yeah, and I know you wanted 1 sentence, so I will just say that. I could go on forever, but it's the trust in the team is important.
Build a very, very strong relationship with your peers in the business, and then make sure you're laser clear in terms of your digital vision, why you want to do this.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you again. I'm sure other people will be contacting you with questions over time. At this point, I'll turn this over to Allan for the next part of the session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks to everyone. Thanks, George and Shamim and Cynthia. That was a really excellent panel. I especially liked the fact that you were able to find a silver lining during these COVID times. That was nice to see. To everybody in the audience, George's presentation will be posted on the website later this afternoon. And I also just want to call out to George for taking the time to pull this panel together and moderate. So now for the final part of this episode, which is Leadership in Times of Crisis with Guy Snodgrass. Let me introduce Guy. Guy is an MIT grad with a master's in nuclear engineering and computer science. He's also the CEO of Defense Analytics. He's a pilot of an FA-18 Hornet, and he spent 2 years as communication director and speechwriter for James Mattis. And finally, he is the author of Top Gun's Top 10, Leadership Lessons from the Cockpit. Please join me in welcoming Guy Snodgrass. Hi, Guy.
Hey, it's great to be with you. Thanks for conducting this fireside chat with me. This is great.
Well, I am really looking forward to this. I read your book and I enjoyed it very much. And so I want to start out with just establishing a couple of touch points between us. I mean, our histories differ because I have never been in a FA-18, although I did work at Boeing for a while and was in their manufacturing area, but that's not even close. So first of all, you went to MIT, I believe, between 1988 and 2000, and we just missed each other because I was there between 1984 and 86, also to get my master's, but in my case, in mechanical engineering.
Yeah, it was such a great program. I had gone for my undergraduate studies at the U.S. Naval Academy down in Annapolis, Maryland, graduated in 1998, and got incredibly lucky. They'll send about 15 graduates a year directly to grad school to get their advanced degrees. And I feel very, very, thankful that I got a chance to go to MIT from 1998 to 2000. And like you mentioned, just had a wonderful time there on campus.
Well, I did too. I very much enjoyed MIT, and I still like MIT, as you can see. MIT is in my blood. The other thing is, you mentioned at the beginning of your book that you're an Eagle Scout, and so I too am a Eagle Scout, as well as my two sons. So I'm a multi-generational Eagle Scout family, and it was interesting to me to see how that sort of influenced you in your early years as you got into your aviation career.
Yeah, I mean, as you well know, and as your sons know, it's such a great program because it exposes you to a lot of broad topics you wouldn't normally get as a high school student. And I also like the fact that they don't necessarily broadcast this as much as I think that scouting should, but it's about leadership. You have leadership within your troop. You have leadership as you go and you do more advanced exercises. And I think, I can tell you for a 100% fact that the U.S. Naval Academy was not going to take me other than the fact that I was an Eagle Scout. And they thought that demonstrated a above average potential for leadership, which I appreciated, and it put me on a great path.
Yeah, well, I have to say that one of my favorite jobs as an adult leader for our local troop was being an Eagle advisor for many scouts and seeing them learn leadership and do their Eagle project. So that's really great. The other thing, speaking of leadership, is, you had talked about the number one thing that the Top Gun school tries to teach is leadership. And I should say that the CIO Symposium as well is really focused on leadership for CIOs, more so than the technology or other aspects of being a CIO. So leadership, I think, is always important. I may be quoting your book there.
Well, you're right. I mean, leadership is the fabric that underpins a lot of success, and it could be in your personal life, in your family. You're setting the tempo. It could be in your community, at your church. It could be on the job site. So you never really know when you're serving as a leader, unless you're in a formal position of leadership, like a CIO is. But I think there's also this element that I've always found to be true, which is that people are always looking to you for leadership. So how you respond to challenges, Just like one of the things I talk about in the book, remaining calm under pressure. I mean, they're looking to you for those verbal and nonverbal cues. And so how you behave actually has a really outsized influence on not only your own success, but the success of those around you and the organization you're a part of.
Yeah. So, in your book, you mentioned talent, passion, and personality. And I thought that was really an interesting combination because, everybody has different mixes. I'm just wondering if, in a time of crisis, do you think one of those three traits kind of emerges to the top, or, is it sort of like the ocean waves? They all sort of, go one after the other.
Sure. So what you're referring to is quite frankly the three criteria we use to select Top Gun instructors. So you mentioned talent, passion, and personality. Talent meaning you need to be at least average, if not above average, in this case, in the fighter jet, because you have to be credible. Your passion has to be evident because it's incredibly hard work, long hours, and if you're not passionate about it, you're going to burn out pretty quick. And the last one is personality, in that you can be very talented and you can be incredibly passionate, but if you're frankly a jerk, then no one's going to want to work with you. They're not going to want to learn from you, and you won't be as effective as you could have been as a Top Gun instructor. So when you talk about the challenges we face in our career path, especially during times of crisis, I'd almost say it's the squishiest one. It's the personality trait that can really make a big difference, because if you are someone who stays calm under pressure, if you're someone who focuses on servant leadership, you're willing to make sure that people around you are successful, and you've got, we've all been surrounded by people throughout our lives who just have that really, motherly or fatherly kind of atmosphere around them. And you go to them, you feel very comfortable with them for advice or for assistance. I think that can really bear a lot of fruit because you're going to draw people into your orbit.
Yeah. So let's get back to something that you said just a moment ago, which is staying calm under pressure. So in the last episode of the digital learning series, we had one of the CIOs talk about the need to scale from 2,000 to 20,000 VPN connections within about a 2-week time frame. And there were other stories as well of how CIOs have been struggling with the COVID-19 crisis. In fact, one of the people, I think it was Sandy Petland, said that right now all CIOs across the world are in crisis mode. So I would imagine that CIOs have to prioritize right now. And I think this is one of the things that you really talked about as being an important leadership skill. I mean, do you have any advice for how CIOs might apply that best practice in their role coping with the crisis?
Sure. Yeah, you're definitely touching on a few elements from the book you've referenced. The first one you mentioned, stay calm under pressure, is so critically important. And I'm glad you raised the point that CIOs right now around the world are probably one of the most pressurized job, and maybe the one vying for equal attention as being a teacher with all the remote learning that's going on. I mean, those are both very stressful positions. So when you think about the first thing you always want to do, and in the book I talk about an aircraft emergency I had where my engine exploded, and the first thing you want to do is you want to almost overreact to that type of situation. It's only our human nature. So that's why remaining calm is so important. I learned a great saying when I was in the U.S. Navy. A mentor of mine had told me that emotion is the enemy of good judgment. So as soon as you get carried away, as soon as you get caught up in the crisis, then you lose your ability to make good decisions. So that's why staying calm is so important. You touched on another element of the book, which is to anticipate problems. And I think that for example, if you take the pandemic as a specific example, we've now worked our way through about 8 or 9 months of the pandemic. And so we have a good sense for what if another resurgence, if we have that second wave people have expressed concern about, if it were to come around, how we might need to respond, because we've already experienced the first wave. So that means we do have some lessons learned. We have the ability to consider what we learned during that experience, and we can be predictive now. We can think, well, the next week, the next month, the next year, what am I likely to face? And knowing that those challenges could pop up, how am I and how is my team best prepared to support the organization? And so I think all of those things can help us not only survive during a time of crisis, but also enable our organizations to thrive.
Yeah, so I was thinking about your comment about anticipating problems. And I mean, first of all, I was just wondering whether you had some process for that. And the reason I asked is you did describe a process on another topic. I think it was from Steve Covey's book. You had this little matrix about
Right.
urgency and importance that I thought that was really helpful to me in terms of thinking through it. I don't know if you want to take a moment just to elaborate that, but also just thinking about, you're under pressure right now. Um, is there a methodology to try to do that anticipation?
I think there really is. And I think one of the things I've always espoused is thoughtful and deliberate leadership, which means that frankly, you have to take extra time. And it's usually outside your normal working hours because as we all know, when, if you have a 9 to 5 job, then usually from 9 to 5, you're putting out fires. You're responding, as we say in the military, to contact, to the problems that pop up throughout the day, the meetings, the phone calls. And you find yourself task saturated, and it's difficult to actually make the time to think deeply and deliberately about some of the challenges you might face. You mentioned one of the things that President Eisenhower had actually mentioned specifically in a speech he gave. Stephen Covey popularized this in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And
Yes.
what you're describing is when it's taking a look at the problems you face. And there's really 2 decisions. One, is this problem urgent or not urgent? And is this problem important or not important? And the great quote from President Eisenhower was that he's found throughout his career that usually the urgent problems were not important and the important problems were never urgent, because if they truly are that important, you have time. You've always got time to sit back, take a deep breath, and let yourself work through the problem set. Another great way that I've heard this put is my former boss, the then Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, had told me once he loved the quote from Albert Einstein, which says that if you're given 60 minutes to save the world, you're going to spend 55 minutes defining the problem and truly understanding it, and then 5 minutes acting. And I think that's a great reminder of the just importance of being diligent, being deliberate with your processes. So that gets back to the main thrust of your question. Is there a process for how you can anticipate problems, how you can set yourself up for success? And I think, there really is. When I reflect back on my time as a fighter pilot, we had a book, almost like a little Bible we had to carry around with us in the cockpit. And it was our emergency procedures. And these were, dozens of emergencies that were so catastrophic in the aircraft, such as an engine fire or a complete loss of your cabin pressurization, something that could genuinely lead to a loss of life or loss of the aircraft. But you had to not only memorize those emergency procedures, but you did all this well in advance of when you'd ever face an actual emergency, right? So you've practiced, you've thought about it very, very deeply. And so when you do face the problem for the first time, you kind of kick into habit and you go back to, we call it brainstem power. The fact that when all hell breaks loose and like you said, sometimes you can feel a little bit of that apprehension or anxiety creeping in, you go back to what you know and what you've practiced. So that lesson has always led me, even in my career since I've left the Navy, to always be thinking deliberately about what's going to come next. I still have a daily habit, now that I use in the military, which is every single night I'll print out my schedule for the next month. And I'm always looking ahead at everything, kind of a tapestry of what I have coming up, because that helps me anticipate the problems I might face, the resources I need to free for success. And that's just a real small example, of course. I mean, CIOs are facing really big enterprise-wide concerns, but you really just have to force yourself to make time to reflect, to basically have a blank sheet of paper and a pen and just give yourself the freedom to think deeply about some of the challenges you're likely to face. And then if you were to face those challenges, what are some of the mitigation steps you could take to either lessen the impact or, better yet, put guardrails into place so that you succeed and never have to face that problem in the first place?
Yeah. Well, I have to say that I did enjoy that chapter where you talked about how you handled that F-18 when the engine failed, and I'll leave it to people to read the book to find out what caused the problems. That was a very interesting story as well, but we don't need to disclose all your secrets here. But there's another thing that I wanted to talk about too that I liked in your book, and this was, and I'm not using exactly the words you took, but I took it as really focusing on respect and integrity. You know, this realization that nobody, you know, wins 100% of the time, but you want people to know that, you know, your intentions are good. And kind of the reason that this struck me is, you know, I've been running the digital learning series, and you know, this is episode 5. We've had 4 other episodes. And what has come out time and again is the need to really focus on the human element. You know, words that have come up are like empathy, EQ, or emotional intelligence quotient, fun, resiliency, humor. People talk about the need to reach out to their employees more often to make sure that they're okay. And I just, so getting back to another quote, I guess my question for you is, you know, in a time of crisis, what might CIOs do? What steps can they take to make each day better than the one before, as you say, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think you actually touched on something that is incredibly important, and that is a lot of times when you face a period of crisis, you know, your brain does shrink down to brainstem power. You're fighting the fire that's immediately in front of you, and it's easy to lose sight of the forest because you're focused on the individual trees. So one of the things that I think about during this pandemic is, despite all the hardship our nation has faced, organizations are facing right now, there's a ton of opportunity. And I think one of the opportunities that we've been touching and dancing around in this conversation is to really grow into that role as a leader. To, you know, even if you still are searching for that self-confidence or the ability to generate elite teams, well, guess what? This is a phenomenal time to get after it, because everybody has been rocked back on their heels. Everybody is facing challenges. And that's why when you asked me earlier, what of those 3 characteristics, talent, passion, or personality would I say is most important right now? I said personality. And you just mentioned some of those attributes: empathy, the ability to understand that everyone's facing hardships. So how can we accommodate them? And all of those decisions that CIOs and other senior leaders and organizations are making right now are going to buy you just amazing payback in the days, weeks, and months to come. Because everyone, you know, whether you think about it or not, everyone's kind of evaluating the organization they're a part of. Do they care about me? Do they express, you know, are they giving me the resources I need to succeed at my job, let alone in my personal life? And so everything that, you know, CIOs and other leaders can do to really make their workforce a priority is going to pay off big dividends. Because I think once we find ourselves on the other side of this pandemic, which we assuredly will, you're going to have a lot of members of your workforce saying, this is, one, a great leader and a great company, and I want to be here for the long haul, because they really genuinely care about me and take care of business. We do things the right way around here. And that gets into a whole host of characteristics that I think are important, like we talked about: servant leadership, trust, integrity, all become very important when you start talking about the effective ways to demonstrate to your workforce that you're a thoughtful leader who cares about them.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I'm going to read a little quote from you that I particularly liked. I have a couple of them. Being able to articulate your own beliefs while understanding and accepting those of others is a powerful tool for success. And I bring that up because I just think in today's times that quote from your book is just an important lesson. For me, it talks about listening and being open to people, especially people you don't agree with. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that struck a chord with me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing the quote. And, you know, we're talking about the crisis in the flashpoints and touch points that CIOs are facing. I know we don't want to get into a political discourse, but at the same time, in the country. And so whether it's in your own organization, in your own family, across the country, or if you're working with international partners, I mean, it's always critically important just to realize that how you feel about something is not usually the way someone else feels about it as well. And I really learned that experience, not only because I moved around the country a lot while in the U.S. Navy, but I spent 6 years overseas living abroad in Japan. And so I basically forced myself to get out into the population, to get to know a lot of Japanese people. And you learn that their perspective on the world is very different than our perspective as Americans. And the perspective here in North Texas is different than it is in Boston. But I mean, that diversity is a real true strength. And I think that applies not only just for our country, it applies for our organizations as well. So anything you can do to foster that diversity of opinion, of experience, of background and ideas will also pay dividends.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you think there's going to be a silver lining for CIOs from this crisis?
I think undoubtedly, yes. I think that this crisis has been a very strong inflection point. We were already a little bit of a tipping point when you think about the technological path that the United States was on. Coronavirus just accelerated it. It pushed us to really explore the boundaries of virtual learning, the ability to conduct meetings and operations outside of the work site. If you think about the fact, even if a company wants to bring a lot of their workers back into the workplace, once we have the all clear signal, well, should you find yourself in a situation where you have to fall back and go virtual again, well, you've already had almost at this point a year of experience of how to make that happen. You can scale and grow quickly. You'll be able to respond to challenges, I think, much more quickly. And all these lessons, not only for how to conduct operations in this challenging time, will be very valuable, but I think it's also changing the workflow and the workforce in America in ways that will be very positive for us moving forward.
Yeah. So I got one more question before we come to a close. And this relates to another thing that you said, that iron sharpens iron. And with that in mind, how do you think we should prepare the next generation of CIOs to take on an ever more complex world? So I'm talking about the people who aren't CIOs yet, people coming up through the ranks.
Right.
How do we train them?
Well, I think there's a couple elements to that question. The first is, the quote, iron sharpens iron, was real important at Top Gun because you were surrounded by people who were also very talented, in many cases, very ambitious. It could be an overly competitive environment, but it never felt that way because there was a lot of camaraderie. You had a shared experience and a shared purpose. And so you really just wanted to achieve your fullest potential as an individual. And you helped each other to your left and to your right to make sure that the whole organization succeeded. So if you take that kind of mindset into the role of a CIO, not only are you responsible, I think, for ensuring that your organization is succeeding, you have a responsibility to those who are more junior in the organization to ensure that you're providing mentorship or possibly sponsorship if you want to take a more direct role in their development. You can create opportunities for individuals to learn and grow by leaps and bounds just by bringing them into a problem, inviting them in to either observe some of these meetings that you're a part of, to be a part of the solution, which is very empowering. I found when I was a commanding officer in Japan, I had a squadron of 240 sailors. I had about 1.2 billion in assets across 12 aircraft that I was responsible for, 12 fighter jets. And it was fascinating to me because throughout my career, I'd always seen that senior leaders kind of treated junior personnel like they were children, didn't expect much of them. And I think that you should expect what you inspect, right? So if I have low expectations, you're going to meet them. If I have high expectations and I raise the bar, most people are going to strive to meet your expectations. So I kept that in mind when I was a commanding officer. I always challenged my sailors, no matter how junior they were, to think above their pay grade, to think outside the box, to bring innovative solutions. And I think as CIOs, we can do that when you really challenge your teams to work above their pay grade, work above their current experience level, because they're going to gain a lot from that experience. You're going to challenge them, and you're going to find that some people may not want to accept that challenge, but a lot of people will. And those are the people who you are educating, and you're giving them a great hands-on experience. You're pouring in, all the years, if not decades of experience you have to help ensure that when they find their way to your position, that they're going to be even more well-equipped than you were for the job. And that's, at the end of the day, what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, guys, I have really enjoyed this conversation, and I guess I'll just circle it back to our common experience in Boy Scouts. I just hope that everybody metaphorically speaking, leaves the campsite better than they found it. And
Absolutely. I think that's a great tone to leave on, and I agree with you.
so thank you very much for your time, and thank you for supporting the MIT community with this interview. Take care.
My pleasure, Allan. Always great talking to you.
This concludes the 2020 MIT Sloan CIO Symposium, the MIT Sloan CIO Digital Learning Series. Be sure to find us on social media. You can find us on facebook.com/MIT CIO. You can find us on Twitter @MIT CIO. Also on LinkedIn, we have a MIT Sloan CIO Symposium company page, and on YouTube, where you can find all of our videos, which are also posted on our agenda page. And this recording will be posted in both of those places within 2 weeks. Please fill out our surveys. We do want to hear your opinions. And that's it for 2020. Bye for now.